beneath the pale moon. But justice is coming and coming soon. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us, secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. Cryptids themselves, yet they stand tall against the darkness, answering the call for every lost soul, every whispered prayer. They fight for the light in the midnight air. From saloons to graveyards where evil sleeps, they walk among us, secrets they keep, nightmare hunters with souls ablaze, cleaning up this town through the dark haze. The night is young, the hunt begins. For against the darkness where hope never ends.
In the shadows of forgotten lore, where legends leave footprints and nightmares are written in blood. He's the voice of modern horror, the best-selling author and cryptid researcher, the name behind the nightmare. D.A. Roberts. Joining him in the field, renowned author and field investigator, the man who tracks what others fear to name. The cryptid hunter, the cast master, the one they call Robbie Jed Raines. And the voice of reason in the madness, the analyst, the investigator, the one who sees through the fog. Carrie Doc Davis. Together, they walk the edge of legend and reality. This is the Nightmare Hunter Podcast.
Good evening, folks, and welcome back to the Nightmare Nation. We are now live on the OnX network, and we are danged happy to be here. For those of you who are watching on our YouTube channel, I give you a quick apology. We had some technical issues, and for some reason, YouTube duplicated the show. So if you are listening, please let other people know in the other chat that they should be coming over here, because this is where we're live. But we are going to have a great show for you guys tonight. Again, we are live with the OnX network for the first time. If you are not subscribed to the OnX network, check them out here on YouTube or where your favorite podcasts are, because they're going to be in a lot of places. And joining me in the studio tonight is one and only Robbie Jed Raines with some big news on a big new book release. Robbie, how you doing, brother?
Doing good, brother. How are you?
I'm alive and kicking so far, but it's early.
Yep, same here. So, yep, Kodiak went live sometime this morning on the ebook version. I still haven't got print done yet, but that's coming. But yeah, it's live and kicking. Already got a review from some guy named D.A. Roberts on there. I mean,
yeah, some weirdo, some hack Coincidentally, that same hack has another book out as well. It just released earlier this morning, like early squirrely this morning. That's Dark Frontiers, the Devil of the Absarokas. And if you guys haven't checked that out, we are already #1 in Western horror, and we're #8 in occult suspense. So we're in the top 10 in 2 categories, and I'm hoping we can hit top #1 in both. But yeah, with that being said, we are going to jump right into tonight's show. I think we've got a great one for you. The Beast Within is something that's always been, foremost in our minds. I know I've been a big werewolf fan since I was a kid. Robbie's probably the biggest werewolf fan alive. So I think, this is kind of a topic that was, long in the making or long in the tooth, whichever way you want to look at it. So, but tonight we are going to be talking about the Beast Within, and that is werewolves, skinwalkers, things that change, and sometimes those things could even be us. We're gonna be talking about the legends, the history of it, as well as the psychological aspect of it. So, without any further ado, the first thing I want to talk about is the archetype of a shapeshifter. And one of the things that I think find fascinating about that is really there's on pretty much every culture on the planet has some lore about a shapeshifter. And we know what Robbie's is. But Robbie, you want to talk a little bit about that, about shapeshifter lore?
Okay, well, like you said, there's multiple shape shifting. In South America, you've got were-jaguars, Nordic tradition.
What do they call that? The Jaguarundi?
Jaguarundi. Then in Norse culture, you've got the berserkers, where the word berserker come from. You've got the Ulfhednar. There's a multiple. I think some others in South America there are were-crocodile people, and even there's an Egyptian god that's, if you want to look at, which most of the Egyptian pantheon were shapeshifters, but you got crocodiles, you got Anubis, you got Wetwawet, Horus. They're all humanoids with animal features. So, like you said, there's something on every major culture and civilization on every continent that has some type of legend or lore about this. Like we've talked about before, sightings of werewolf type creatures go all the way back to the 1700s with French Canadian trappers in the frontiers. You got the rougarou, you got the loup-garou, which is French for werewolf. So all those stories in France. The actual term werewolf is derived from a German word were, meaning
man,
to change, or man, a man and change, something like that. And wolf, but they're everywhere. So that's where a lot of people, sometimes get confused with the term dogman, which didn't come around until the late 80s, early 90s, for the Michigan DJ that was talking about their version of the Beast of Bray Road, and he just called it the Michigan Dogman, and that term just kind of stuck, just like Bigfoot stuck. It's more of a, like calling every tissue a Kleenex type thing. Because, how many times have we talked about the Pure Rice map and there being creatures that look like werewolves or cynocephali in the margins? So the history of shifters and people that change back and forth from man to animal or whatever goes back as far as written history. You love to talk about St. Michael and Catholic iconography being referred to as the dog-headed saint. Saint Christopher, I'm sorry. And was that way until he performed his first miracle.
Mm-hmm. Knightley's got a good question, and since you brought it up, I'll let you field it, Robbie. He wants to know, is the Beast of Bray Road a werewolf or a dogman?
Well, and that's the thing. Dogman was a term that was coined about the time that thing became, well, not the time it became popular, because the sightings go back a good ways longer, but they were starting to see sightings of the same type of creature in Michigan, and that's where that term came from. Was he called it the Michigan Dogman, and the term dogman just stuck, and now it seems like every wolf type creature or anything like that is called a dogman. The term werewolf is far older than the term dogman, But now, as far as what do I think werewolf is something that is totally different than what a dogman is. I think a dogman is maybe like DA and I talked about, some type of holdover or relic population of direwolf, and it's just an animal. But I think werewolf is something totally different, because you talk about the cynocephali, the dog-headed people. I think that's probably a lot of where the werewolf legends have come from. People just didn't know how to explain things back then. Do I think people can actually shift into that? We've actually done a show about that with Doc and Steve involved too, with their medical expertise, and both of them were pretty stuck on the side of they didn't think a human body could physically go through what it needed to go through to transform from I'm talking just without kind of supernatural type thing. Now,
we'd certainly move it into the realm of the supernatural,
right? But that's where you get into the differences between a dogman or a werewolf or skinwalker or something like that is uses something that's supernatural or demonic or whatever the case may be.
And one of the big differences between a werewolf and a skinwalker, and I know this question is going to crop up because it always does. I want to kind of address this right now. Big difference between a werewolf and a skinwalker is generally a werewolf is considered a curse that's passed to someone and then they involuntarily change. A skinwalker is deliberate. It's a shaman who went dark, about as dark as you can possibly go. I mean, like soul-staining dark, and in order to gain the powers of a skinwalker. So they're not the same. They're not even close.
No. And, we've got Hollywood or Hollyweird, however you want to look at it, to thank for stuff like that, because you get the movie Skinwalkers, and it's about werewolves. That is not even close to being the same, like DA said. A skinwalker can transform into dang near just about anything, whereas, a werewolf or something like that, or some type of were creature, is only going to specifically turn into whatever that creature is. Or, a werewolf's not going to be able to turn into, a cat or a bird or anything like that. It's specifically going to be man to wolf, wolf to man.
And that's very contrasting to the skinwalker, because generally a werewolf, like I said, is a curse, so that would make whoever's bearing the curse a victim of the curse, whereas a skinwalker, that's a straight up villain. They chose that. They did it on purpose.
Yeah, and William's been on the show before, and he's talked and went in depth about that, about the things that you have to do to follow that path. It's something specifically that you have to do something so bad, so heinous, that there's really not a lot of coming back from without, dare I say, divine intervention.
Pretty much, you've basically bought the express pass to hell at that point.
Yep, exactly. And so I guess to answer my question about the Beast of Bray Road, what do I think it is, if that's what Knightley was asking? I know I kind of, skirted around the issue, but I thought some of that stuff needed to be said. What I think the Beast of Bray Road is, I believe, is probably just a dogman type creature. I'm one of those, I don't really like the term dogman, because I think people have taken that and, just like I said, with, it's calling a tissue a Kleenex. That's the big brand name that everybody notices. So every tissue is a Kleenex. So I think that's the same thing. So whatever type of canid creature that it is, it's a canid creature that can walk upright. Now, is dogman the best term? Well, maybe if it looks like the one DA saw, that probably is better coined as a dog man, because he says it looked more like a dog. What'd you say, a bull mastiff or something? That was the type of head it had. So maybe dog man is a good term for that. But when you see one that resembles more of a wolf, I mean, I'm one of the ones that I just prefer to call it an unknown canid species. So I believe that's what I believe that's what the Beast of Bray Road is. It's one of those creatures. Now, if you choose to call it dogman, that's fine. That's just me being type of werewolf fan that I am, I can't stand the term dogman being all encompassing for everything. It doesn't work in my opinion.
So, here's the werewolf, it seems to be locked into a lunar cycle. Whereas I've heard that may just be a Hollywood legend, that the classic werewolf could actually change at any time. But what do you think, Robbie? Do you think the lunar cycle thing is a Hollywood myth, or do you
Yeah,
think that's part of the
well,
makeup?
a lot of the main legends that we've got about werewolves come from Hollywood. Am I still there?
I can still hear you.
Oh,
We lost you there for a second.
your picture just went bad. I was like, am I still there? Anyway, uh,
I didn't do it.
the
Wasn't me.
the famous saying from Universal's werewolf movie with Lon Chaney, even a person who is pure at heart and says his prayers by night, they become a wolf when the wolfbane blooms and the autumn moon is bright. That was made up for the movie. So, but a lot of people, and that's where the lunar cycle stuff started coming from. And I think that was just, they needed a way to kind of tie it in. And, lunatic comes from, the lunar cycle. So I think it was just something that, when people say, oh, it's just a crazy person. Now the moon was full. But what have we talked about predators, especially nocturnal predators? They're going to hunt a lot, be a lot more active and hunt a lot more when the moon's full because they can see even better. They don't have to rely on as much of their night vision because of the tapetum lucida. They would be able to see even better. So I think that if they were more active during that time, that was just an easy way to say, oh, well, they're controlled by the cycles of the moon.
Well, even predators hunt in cycles of the moon. You get a lot more nocturnal predator activity during a full moon and the nights leading up and before.
But it doesn't have anything to do with the moon making them do that way.
No, it's just because it's easier to see.
Yeah, and I think that, but if they're more active and that's where people are looking, they're automatically making that leap. Oh, well, this would be good for movies. It's the full moon. A lot of the modern stuff is kind of getting away from that, and even the books, like if you look back at I don't remember if they said it in the book as much, but I know in the movie Silver Bullet, they kind of hinted on, well, what if he's not really controlled by the moon? What if he's this way almost all the time, but as the moon gets fuller, he's more in the middle when the moon is here. But once the moon gets to a certain phase, what if that's just the point where he's completely and totally animalistic? So they kind of started hinting at stuff like that, and that the moon really doesn't have as much sway over the transformation.
And again, I think that the whole moon aspect was really more of an invention of Hollywood, because in classic werewolf lore, it says that they can shift at will. They don't even have to wait for nighttime. Yeah,
and even when you look at stuff like the Beast of Gévaudan and Peter Stoop and all those, there's really in those stories, no mention of, I mean, maybe some of those attacks were during a full moon, but I'm sure, especially if you look at how many times the attacks happened, there was plenty of times that those attacks were happening when there was no full moon. So, I don't,
werewolf lore. Go ahead, Robbie. Sorry.
I was just saying, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't remember any of those stories much at all mentioning the moon. And think about the first lycanthropic mention, King Lycaon or King Lycan, however you want to pronounce it. That has nothing to do with the moon.
It's actually older than
that.
I'm talking
about that one. Taking that, for example, there's no mention of the moon.
Right. In the Epic of Gilgamesh in 2100 BC, Gilgamesh rejects the goddess Ishtar, telling her she was a cruel goddess and he didn't want to be with her. And she basically, the reason why he didn't want to be with her is she'd gotten angry at a former lover and turned him into a wolf. So that's the first reference of a human being in recorded history of a human being turned into a wolf in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Of course,
Yeah,
like you mentioned, the king, the Greek king Lysaean, Saint Augustine in the 5th century. In the City of God, Augustine acknowledges the widespread belief in men turning into wolves via witchcraft, although he condemns it as heresy.
yeah, and like in none of those does it ever mention anything to do with the moon or the lunar cycle or anything like that. So I think yes, that's been and even silver. Because I think silver came in because of silver's purity, and that was something that they latched onto and was like, okay, well, this is an evil beast, a spawn of Satan. You have to have something pure to kill it. Up silver, because how much was silver used in medicine back then? Like, to
Well,
cleanse
silver was
blood.
noted for its purity. I mean, it was used in religion. It was used in a lot of folklore and a lot of ritual magic because of its purity.
Yeah, and just like Jonathan told us the other day with vampires, most of the stuff we get from Vampire Legend came from Bram Stoker, and he made most of that up just to make the book sound more. Because he's really overpowered if you think about it, and you had to have some kind of way to defeat him. So that's where that came from. So I think it's a lot of the same tropes. Is you can't have a completely overpowered bad guy. You got to have a way. The good guy's got to have a way to be able to survive, even if it's a small one. You got to have something. So things like that. It's swayed or it's trapped in the lunar cycle. So that way you could if it's not during the lunar cycle, it's just a normal human. You can kill it with silver, but whatever. So a lot of the stuff that we have that we're going on comes from Hollywood.
Unfortunately, Hollywood has done irreparable harm to a lot of folklore because they didn't actually adhere to the folklore.
Or they just didn't study it at all.
Yeah, they just took the legend and ran with it. And unfortunately, that does happen. I understand from a writer's standpoint, and Robbie will certainly agree with this. At some point, as a writer, you do have to take dramatic license.
Yeah.
But I don't believe in taking dramatic license to the point where the legend's even unrecognizable. But that's just me.
Yeah. And Sherry, we said that we know the moon affects people. That's where the term lunatic comes from. Is from the lunar. cycle.
Ask any first responder.
Yeah,
if the things don't go crazy around the time for the full moon.
But what we're saying is we don't believe that the cycle of the moon is what. If people do change in that, we don't think that that's what causes a change. Is the moon. The moon affects The moon affects tides. It affects everything. So I mean, yes, it does affect people. We're not dismissing that. We're just saying it doesn't necessarily. Now, are we 100% right on that? We can't say that, but
Yeah,
that's just
exactly. Well, we're also talking about folklore. We don't even know how much of that is correct.
true. But what we were saying is, if you go back and look at these old accounts, King Lycaon, Epic of Gilgamesh, Beast of Jevadan, Peter Stoop, if you go back and look at all those, not many of them all ever mention anything to do with the moon.
There are even more references to werewolves in France other than the Beast of Jevadan.
Oh yeah.
When I was doing the research for this show, I kind of dug them up. Of course, you mentioned the Peter Stump in Bedburg, the Bedburg werewolf. That was in 1589. And for those of you who aren't familiar with that story, a German farmer confessed under torture. That's the important part. Under torture, he confessed to being a werewolf and committing horrific murders. He was executed by breaking on a wheel and beheading. But in 1521, Pierre Bourgeot and Michel Verdun in France allegedly made a pact with the devil and used an ointment to transform themselves into wolves. They confessed to child murders and were burned at the stake. In 1573, Giles Garnier, that was known as the Werewolf of Dole, he claimed to use a magical salve to become a werewolf and prey on children. He was executed after a widely sensationalized trial. And the last one that came up historically was the Gandelon family in France in 1598. They were accused of witchcraft and lycanthropy after a wolf attack in the area. Multiple family members were executed, including a girl who confessed after being tortured.
Yep, and what's the common denominator there? Torture.
Confessed under torture.
It's like, all right, confess. Nope. All right, we're gonna pull your fingernails out one at a time until you confess. Then they finally confess. Okay, good. I'm glad you confessed. Now cut their head off. I mean,
Exactly. In medieval England and parts of Northern Europe, there was an Anglo-Saxon law called the Wolfhifod, meaning wolf-headed. They claimed that there were types of outlaws roaming, brigands, bandits roaming the countryside that they claimed were wolves, and they claimed that they not only existed outside of human society, but that they were actually some type of wolf. There were lots of references to lycanthropy in a lot of the early Christian texts, and most recently, one of the ones I wanted to point out, and Robbie and I are probably going to do an entire show on this one, is there's a small cemetery in a little bitty town in Oklahoma where there are multiple gravestones that say "murdered by human wolves."
yeah, we've talked about that several times before, and you also get things like DA was saying with the Beast of Jevadon, for example. Obviously, that's probably one of the more popular and well known ones. And you get a movie like Brotherhood of the Wolf, and all in all, that wasn't a bad movie, but it kind of strayed away from the actual context of what was put down. They made it some kind of tortured beast. I think, what was it, a hyena that they said it was at the end of that movie, DA, something like that. And while it's entirely possible that it was some type of animal, they really thought that there was something to all this, because even the king sent people and soldiers and conscripts.
Well, he kind of had to, didn't it? It killed well over 100 people.
Oh yeah, it was over 100 people. So I don't think that it was one particular exotic animal that got away from that many hunters for that long.
Well, the Beast of Jevadon killed people for 3 years.
Yeah,
1764 to 1767.
And even in that type of setting, that that remote, at some point somebody had to have gotten a clear shot at this thing, which there were reports that it was shot several times.
Well, it was finally brought down by a hunter. Jean Chastel killed a large animal in 1767, and the attack stopped.
But we still don't know if that was just because, if it really was a werewolf, it moved on because it was like, okay, my cup's blown, so to speak. I better move on, because I think, because other things popped up in other places years later. So, but then you also got similar stories here in America. The Werewolf Springs. That's a really compelling story if you look at the entire story of that. I loved hearing Miss
The real question is whether, Miss Naomi tells it best, but the real question of that is, was that a dog man or a werewolf? Although they did call it Werewolf Springs. You want to throw a little history on that? We don't have to do the full story. I mean, if they we want to get that, we'll have to get Miss Naomi on, but just kind of give us the highlights.
Basic rundown of that story is, and it's the same type of situation that happened around that time. A train derailed, kind of like we do on the show all the time. But a train derailed, and they said, there again, wild man from Borneo escaped. So it's in Dixon County, Tennessee, is where the actual Werewolf Springs is located, and there's still sightings to this day. But there was other people that got killed and other animals and livestock, but the main one that garnered so much attention was a wealthy landowner and his servant were coming back. They were on like one of them little buckboards, is what I expect it was, right, DA?
Yeah, a little buckboard wagon.
Buckboard pulled by. Yeah.
Horse or two.
And they were headed back to his house, and they got attacked. They jumped off the horse, jumped off the buggy, but instead of running together, they kind of split and went separate ways. Well, the landowner went and hid behind a log or behind a tree. He was hiding when he didn't know where his servant went to, because they went in opposite directions. And shortly after he started hiding, he starts hearing his servant being attacked. He hears him screaming, but he's so scared that he just doesn't move for the rest of the night. Finally, when daylight comes, he walks back to town, tells them what's going on. And like I said, I guess this was more the straw that broke the camel's back, because this guy was pretty wealthy. So they get this hunter in. I don't remember what the hunter's name was, but they get him to come in. They pay him an exorbitant amount of money for the time to go hunt and kill this thing. Well, and I want to say the cabin was on the wealthy landowner's property, if I'm right, because he tracks it around that area where there's a little cabin.
Yeah, I think it was a hunting cabin on his property.
And he decides, okay, this is where I'm going to lure this thing in to trap it. And he sits there. It starts getting dark. He goes into the cabin, and it was just like I said, an old hunter's cabin, and it had large log rafters across the top. So he puts himself up in the rafters and waits for it. I'm assuming he baited it somehow, maybe fresh goat's blood or something like that, something to draw it in. It gets in, and apparently he was just out of range because by his account, several times it's jumped up and took swipes at him, and he says it was bipedal, it was on 2 feet. He pretty much almost emptied it. Well, he did empty his rifle, and he almost emptied his gun. I think he said he left one round in his gun, and he was like, this thing's not going to kill me. So he was saving that one round. But as he was getting ready to unalive himself, the sun starts coming up. Said the creature looks, sees the sun's coming up, takes off. So he waited for probably the better part of a couple of hours before he finally got down. He goes back to the town. I think, if I'm not mistaken, he gave him the money back and said, I'm done.
Yeah, he wouldn't go. He refused to go back out.
Yeah, he said, I'm not going back out after that. He said that thing is going to kill somebody else. And that's the most famous story of Werewolf Springs.
There was another example in Europe in 1853. So this would have been right around the Werewolf Springs time. That was in called the Spanish Werewolf. Manuel Blanco Robenzada confessed to killing 13 people, claiming he was cursed with lycanthropy. His case was one of the first to raise questions about mental illness versus supernatural beliefs. He was sentenced to death initially, although they later commuted his sentence to life. I guess he had no more transformations once he was in prison, because the books don't say anything about it.
Yeah, I've always said truth is stranger than fiction anyway. And the things that, and we've said this plenty of times before, back then people didn't want their 15 minutes of fame as much as people do nowadays. When they said something, most of the time, because your word was your bond back then. If you were proven to be a liar or, somebody who couldn't be trusted, then you pretty much were done. I mean, you couldn't do much. All the victims messed up, don't you? They forgot. They forgot begging strips, yeah.
He said, didn't know one of the victim killed the wild man? Didn't one person kill one of the wild men? In which case?
In Werewolf Springs?
Not in Werewolf Springs, I know for sure.
No, because
there are other stories where people had been killed and where werewolves had been supposedly killed, but not in the Werewolf Springs incident.
Yeah,
Northwoods, you cracked me up, brother.
On the board.
Rim shot.
In Jevadon, yes, they did kill a large creature. An animal.
And mysteriously, the attacks did stop. So It would seem like they got it, but maybe it's just possible. Well, considering it wasn't all that long after, maybe it just moved over into Spain.
Yeah,
they do share a border.
And Notley, they may very well have been too. But the hunter reclaimed that said that there was, or recounted that there was one that attacked him inside the cabin. Mm-hmm. I've never heard that anybody killed another one. It may be. I just haven't read about it, but I don't remember reading anything about that.
I remember part of the story that Miss Naoma said that after the hunter gave up, they organized a hunting party, kind of like in the movie Silver Bullet. They got a whole bunch of armed people out and sent them out. And there was fog when they went out into the woods, and I think it was 6 or 7 of the hunters disappeared while they were hunting it.
Maybe where Stephen King got that from.
It could be. It could be a certain parallel there, but that was actually related to the Werewolf Springs incident, where multiple hunters disappeared while hunting for the thing.
Yep. And Cage, if you're talking about the creature that they killed in Jevadon, it was supposed to go back to the King's Court to be studied by whoever the guy from the movie, not him, but what his character was based on, was supposed to study it, but I don't think it ever made it. I think
it was pretty much, it either wound up in a private collection or maybe it wasn't dead.
Yeah, but I don't think it ever made it back to the King's Court for that guy to study it.
So, what's your thoughts on Skinwalkers, Robbie?
I don't want anything to do with them because they're bad news.
Thank you, Larry. Yeah, that one gives you the heebie-jeebies because it's really not a cryptid, not in any way, shape, or form.
If anybody's ever listened to William talk, or DA and I've actually had just one-on-one conversations with him and listened to some of the stuff he says about that and about those things, it's nightmare fuel.
Oh yeah, and they're so bad that the Navajo people won't even say the name. They refer to them as either coyotes or as spirits. Or they refuse to say the name, fearing it will bring one down on them.
Natalie, you may be right. Like I said, I don't remember that, but they're very well. I do think you're right about them saying that 2 escaped from the train wreck, but once they say that, they're pretty much the only stories talk about 1. But you're not, unless this is a immortal supernatural creature, you're going to have some type of population for them to still be sightings today. So, there very well could have been more than 1, and they didn't get them all.
In 1878 on the Navajo reservation, they had what they referred to as the witch purge. It's a recorded event. You could look it up. Dozens of suspected witches were killed on the Navajo Nation, driven by fear of skinwalkers and other malevolent evil spellcasters. Should tell you how seriously the Navajo take that. They rounded up dozens of suspected witches and put them to the torch.
Well, I mean, that's no different than the werewolf and witch trials of Salem. I mean, how many people were killed during those because people suspected them of being witches and werewolves?
Did somebody gift some subs? Because I'm getting a bunch of them all of a sudden.
Yeah.
Who was it? Bobby Singleton. Bobby, thank you, brother. I really appreciate that. And congratulations to everybody that got one of those gifted subs. Bobby, thank you so much, sir. I really appreciate that. I was going to say something and I completely lost my train of thought. When it comes to skinwalkers, though, I think there is a certain similarity to the werewolf legend in so far as it really paints a clear picture of moral boundaries. I think one of the most things that people find so fearsome about werewolves is the taboos they break. I mean, it's giving in to rage, it's giving in to the animal within. And then, of course, there's, the stories that werewolves eat people. So I think that there's a real psychological element there. And I think the same thing is with the skinwalkers. I think that it's so ingrained in the psyche of Native American lore that, to even accusing someone of that is enough to raise, almost get them, outcast from the reservation. These are such obvious representations of huge taboos in our brain. For example, the skinwalker having to kill like a loved one or an infant or something like that, something truly dark to become that, and a werewolf consuming human flesh when in the wolf form. So yeah, these do certainly represent huge psychological fears and taboos in our brains.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, especially back in. I mean, obviously today's culture and society too, but back then, whereas it might not get you burned at the stake now, back then accusing somebody, that's probably. I mean, you think about it, if you tick somebody off, and they were the right person at the right time and had the right ear to bend, you could die if you just because you made somebody mad.
The perfect example of the Salem witch trials.
Yeah,
those people were put to death on the accusations of a couple of teenage girls.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. If you had the right ear to bend and somebody ticked you off, it could end your life. At the very least, your credibility and everything was ruined. I mean,
because you'd always be under that suspicion. So anything you did from then on, whoa.
Yeah, because even which I don't think there was very many that, if they went on trial, I don't think there was very many that didn't or weren't put to death. Some of them obviously were probably jailed for the rest of their life.
Well, look how many confessed after being tortured.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's pretty much if you were accused, your life was over, no matter how, whether you died or whether you were either going to be tortured almost to death, and then if you finally admitted it just for them to stop torture, they were going to kill you, or they tortured you enough for you to admit it, and then they say, okay, we're going to put you in jail for the rest of your life. So your life was pretty much over just because somebody didn't like you and accused you, and that was it. So I mean that's not a fun way to live if you had to worry about stepping on some toes and offending people. I mean,
yeah, and like you're saying, I mean that's just a great way for someone who was wanting to get rid of somebody to basically end their credibility or end their life. I mean, in those cases where they were put to the wheel or were tortured by numerous different means, eventually anyone's going to crack just to get them to stop.
Yeah, and that's just that's no way to live a healthy life, having to worry about.
Like, you're a werewolf. No, I'm not. Oh, I'm going to torture you until you say you are. So, what do you think about Skinwalker Ranch?
If they got one or two people, Skinwalker Ranch, I think there's some things.
I think that's connected.
That are strange about that, but also I think
probably
there's
you're
maybe some paranormal,
jumping a little bit. Maybe it's just
supernatural. Yeah, you were jumping on my end a minute ago too, so I don't know if we just got to
have connectile dysfunction.
Satellite thing. Yeah,
I'm suffering from connectile dysfunction.
I think there might be some. I think there might be some supernatural, paranormal things going on over there. I don't think it's everything that they're, because it's ratings, obviously. So I don't think everything that they portray is what's actually going on. But I do think there's some strange things going on. Because, I mean, you think about it, like Nightly just said, there's werewolf sightings there. They've sighted everything there. Bigfoot, werewolf, ghosts, UFOs, orbs, skinwalkers. I mean, you name it, they've said that it's happened there. I just don't know that that's 100% accurate, that every single cryptid or paranormal or supernatural thing in this earth has one specific place in the United States that they all happen to show up at.
Then also we've got to take into consideration that a lot of that's probably sensationalized for television.
Oh yeah, it's ratings.
Oh, Miss Lene explained that we got solar storms going on, so that's probably why we're having some lags and glitches.
Probably.
Well, I want to get back to something.
There's no doubt about that, fellas. There's no doubt about it.
We got solar storms.
Oh yeah, this the heaviest in my lifetime. To be honest with you.
Holy crap!
Yeah, they're pretty good. I mean, when you can see with the naked eye down here in Arkansas, the Northern Lights, it's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
But I mean, I hope everybody can hang out and enjoy, because we will get any kinks worked out. Well, there shouldn't be any, but I'm thinking that is the issue. But I just wanted to jump in and say hello to all your awesome fans in the chat room, man. They are awesome.
And folks, it's Race Hobbs. He's the producer from UNX Network, and he's been one that's handling all the messages you see popping up and putting up everybody's questions. This is an awesome experience for me and Robbie, because we've got a producer that's actually running all that stuff instead of me frantically scrambling to try to get everything going. So, yeah, and I do apologize for the lags. Like we said, we got some solar flares going on, some pretty heavy ones. But on top of that, there's going to be some growing pains this is our first broadcast with UNX. So there'll be a little bit of growing pains, but we're going to get all of it ironed out. I think it's going to be awesome. And this is going to be fantastic for all of us. And
DA, I did ramp up the video to 1080p. So
that might have something to do with it too.
Yeah, if we push it back to 720 again, it'd probably be a lot easier.
Probably. But hey, can't have everything. Where would you put it?
Like you said, growing pains. It's just we'll figure it all out. And it ain't like y'all in the chat know this. It ain't like we haven't had problems before. So
that ain't no lie. But I want to jump back to something that you mentioned earlier, Robbie.
What's that?
Kind of go back to. Let's talk a little bit about were-jaguars. I know that's South America, not North America. But let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, I touched on it just a little bit in Operation Blood Eagle, but I really didn't jump into the lore. Does that really date back just as far, if not farther, than a lot of Native American legends? North American.
Yeah. I mean, how long has that culture, that Mayan and Aztec culture, been around?
Well, look how many of the gods of the Aztecs and the Mayans were also, a shapeshifter. They turned into a jaguar. Yeah. They turned into a bird. Quetzalcoatl.
Yep. And that's what I've said this before, and I said it before we started hearing stuff about Drury Mincy. I've said that a lot of the stuff that we've talked about in the LBL, I said that's more feline behavior than it is canine behavior.
Like bodies up a tree?
Yeah. Or deer hide up a tree. Who's to say that wasn't some type of bipedal?
Well, but in the case of where we were at, though, I wasn't very high, and it was on a small branch.
True, but what did we find out?
6-7 feet.
What did we find out about after that happened?
We found out about Drury Mincy, which is, as the crow flies, is less than 10 miles away.
So I've kind of been thinking about that a lot lately. I still believe that was a Bigfoot thing, but it's
not outside the realm of possibility.
It makes you think, makes you have,
Well, even in the dead of winter, when you and me and Doc went out there, even in the dead of winter, just look how thick the woods are out there.
Yeah.
I mean, you could get lost out there in the dead of winter with no leaves on the trees.
Yeah. Well, but most of those places are like Combs Ferry. They're double and triple canopy sometimes.
Exactly.
So not all the leaves are going to fall.
Knightley says, what's in, you mean Drury Mincy? Drury Mincy is an area here in Missouri where we've got some interesting reports out of, because of the activity there. I have not gone in there because I don't want to go in alone or just one or two other people. I've been kind of waiting until I could get a decent sized group to go in there. But it, much like Joe Bald and Combs Ferry, just mysteriously, they shut down the campground in that area and won't let you in. When it was going into, they shut that down in July, and for them to shut down a campground during the height of camping season in Missouri, It's pretty damned unusual. Of course, they gave the same tired old excuse. It was too expensive to update the campground, but the campground was just like Joe Balder or Combs Ferry. They were all primitive campsites. There was nothing to update. You didn't have to run new power lines. You didn't have to run new water lines because none of it was there.
Yeah. So, like I said, I still believe what we ran across was Bigfoot activity, but after we found that out, I was kind of like, that makes you wonder.
Oh, absolutely makes you wonder.
So, yeah, food for thought.
Here's another one of your subjects, Robbie. The Ulfhednar and the Berserkers.
Yep, two of my favorites.
Because there's, in Norse mythology, even in the Volsung saga, it talks about people, these warriors transforming, and it's described they ran in without weapons and fought with their bare hands, and it seemed like no blade or arrow could stop them. So were they changing? Were they, there's some people that claim that they had a special concoction of fermented herbs that they drank before going into battle to make them, not feel pain.
That's the popular.
But there are others that say they actually changed.
Yeah, that's the popular, scientific explanation. Is they,
of course, they're going to look for a scientific explanation.
That's basically they were high and they felt no pain, and is that possible? Yeah, of course it's possible. We don't know for sure exactly but there were thousands of accounts that these were not normal people. They didn't act like normal people that were just hallucinating or things like that. I mean, they did things in battle that just
normal men couldn't do.
Could not be explained. And a lot of times, started with chanting and, getting themselves in a different spiritual set. So Wyatt, and like I said, even the term berserker came from berserkers. The Ulfhednar, dogs of Odin, dog-headed soldiers, whatever. There's 100 different descriptions of what they were called, but those two types of individuals were some of the most feared in battle that there were.
You've also got Norse stories of transformation in the Wild Hunt, where people who were caught unawares would get swept up in the hunt and become wild animals and wouldn't even realize what had happened to them until they woke up naked miles away, covered in blood or whatever. But people that were just normal people would get swept up into the Wild Hunt and become one of the creatures of the hunt.
Yep. Hunting the hunting the evil spirits and the evil spirits that had escaped from Hela and were running loose on the world.
Right. The hunt ran at a certain time every year. And it said even in the Scandinavian countries today that you're supposed to still be able to hear the horn of the Wild Hunt on certain nights in the winter. Here's something for you, Robbie. And I know this doesn't necessarily apply to you and I because we're both werewolf nut jobs. Like to the point of when I was kids, I would stare at my hand, like willing it to transform, that kind of crazy crap. When I was a kid, okay, I did it last night too, but it's a whole different ball of wax. But what do you think is the biggest fear that becoming a werewolf would represent for, say, normal people?
Losing control and not being able to, losing that rational side of your, I think that's the biggest fear, and it's also the biggest intoxication for people.
Yeah, Robbie, let me get you to hold that thought, because we are at 5 minutes till the top of the hour, and folks, we got to pay some bills. We're going to take a quick minute to air a commercial. That's part of the Unex, because we are going out on radios now worldwide. So give us just a moment while we run a couple of quick commercials, and we will be back with you shortly here in just a few minutes. Thank you, folks.
The Unex Network presents a health and wellness spiritually based brand of hemp-derived CBD products made by Hopewell Farm in Harrogate, Tennessee. We apply our Cathara energy work with all of our plants and products. Our products made in small batches with only 2 ingredients of pure hemp, full spectrum crude oil, and coconut-derived MCT oil. Third-party lab tested for potency and legal THC levels with 6 strengths of 1 ounce oil to choose from. Know what you're buying and get what you pay for from Hopewell Farm. Applied directly to a specific area, Hopewell Farm topical salve in 1 ounce and ½ ounce sizes, made with pure hemp crude oil, comfrey extract, and all natural ingredients. Find the Hopewell Farm link and coupon code on the Unex Network website at unexnetwork.com. That's unexnetwork.com. The new book, How to Research a Haunted House by paranormal investigator Margie Kay and professional researcher Violet Wisdom, is now available from Unex Media. This one-of-a-kind book explains how to do research on a house with uncommon methods and resources used by historic home researchers, and how to determine who may be doing the haunting and why. How to research a haunted house can be used by homeowners, renters, investors, and it should be in the library of all professional paranormal investigators. Get this unique book at unexmedia.com or amazon.com. That's unexmedia.com or amazon.com.
And we're back. And Race, thanks you for handling that for us. Great segue, brother. And I'm going to get a copy of that book. I mean, because we have done some paranormal stuff around here in Springfield, and my buddy Eric and I are getting ready to do a paranormal investigation out at the old Union Cemetery. So yeah, I need to get a copy of that book myself.
But going back to what you're saying, I think that's depending on who you are, that's either the biggest intoxication or the biggest fear, that is that losing control and not being able to. It's either I can't control anything and I don't know what I'm going to do, or I don't have to worry about it. You know, it's 6 one, half dozen another. Depending on who you are and what your moral compass is set to, that could be the biggest turn on or the biggest turn off about that.
Well, and also the potential of you having no say in it. I mean, you like in your first book, there was that struggle as he discovered that he was a werewolf. There's that struggle of, do I let the beast take over or do I control this myself? And not everybody would have the strength to do that.
Well, and
I think that would be a big part of the fear.
Yeah, and that's why I used that, using that parable of the 2 wolves, because regardless of whether you turn into a werewolf, everybody's got the potential to do good and everybody's got the potential to do evil. Everybody's got those 2 wolves tied up inside of them. Which one lives is the one you feed. But having that, like Kay Bauer said, having that strength, the super speed and all that stuff would be cool. But what do you use that for? And that's the ultimate question. What superpower would you want? And what would you do with it if you had it? Oh, I want invisibility. Well, what would you use it for? I want super speed. What would you use it for? I want super strength. What would you use it for? Yeah, look at all the comic books we got. You know, like Captain America. The super serum worked on Steve Rogers because he was a good person. He was already weak. He knew what it was like to be weak, and he knew what people who were already stronger than him that had been that way their whole life. He saw what they, and he was not going to be that way. So therefore, it magnified what he already was.
Right.
It's the Red Skull. It magnified what he already was, which was cruel, evil, and I think it's the same thing. It's just, and that's what the story, or that's the journey Rick had to go through. You know, he was a good guy, but that power is still intoxicating of being able to do just about anything you want to do, and nobody's really able to stop you. Would you give in to that temptation, or would you fight it? And you know, obviously later on we understand why Rick was able to fight it, but at first you don't understand that. So as normal people, would we be able to fight that? Would you be able to resist that temptation? And I think that's, like I said, that's either the scariest part of it or the most enticing part of it.
Yeah, I would agree. Billy, thank you. Glad you started the book today. Roxanne, I'm with you right there. I think normal is the setting on a dryer. I don't think there's any of us who are quite normal, especially if you're hanging out with this crowd. Because we passed normal back 4 exits on the freeway. Again, for those of you who are just popping in, I know we normally go live at this time. I want to say thank you and welcome to the Nightmare Nation and welcome to the NX Network. We appreciate you guys join. Make sure you're subscribed to both channels, because I think this is going to be an awesome partnership. But jumping right back into that, I think for me, one of the biggest fears of that would be losing control of my temper. I've got a bad temper, and ask my wife, she'll tell you. And I've had it since I was a kid. But I think one of my biggest fears would be losing that grip on it. I've got a pretty good grip on my temper, but losing and lashing out without restraint or hesitation, I would be afraid of the damage I could do to somebody. Yeah. And I think that's part of why there's a check and balance there. Because there's still part of me would love to be a werewolf, but then it comes to that where do you draw the line? Does the beast do you become the beast, or the beast become you?
Yep. And I think that's why I went with that, because I have been a werewolf nut my entire life. Like I said, I've seen probably every werewolf movie that's came out, with the exception of maybe 4 or 5. Very rarely does somebody say, "Hey, have you seen this werewolf movie?" And I say, "No, I haven't seen that one." But if I haven't, I usually go out and try to find it and watch it. So it has been something that I've always been fascinated with, and that's why I thought it was such a good thing to latch onto, is that struggle, because a lot of times in the stories they don't focus on what that struggle is that the person's having internally. The main bad guy in that book, he didn't even try to fight it. He just completely gave in and just let the power go.
Yeah.
And that really, you can look at that in everyday society. If somebody wins, $900 and something million lottery, what are they going to use that money for? Are they going to use it to help people, or are they going to use it to not help people?
Crazy.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the same thing, or the same paradox, and that's why I thought that was so interesting to tell that tale of losing yourself to what you get that power. Power is seductive. We know that. It's the Uncle Ben thing. With great power comes great responsibility. And how many stories do you hear a version of that line? Ultimate power corrupts ultimately. It's the same thing, but it's what you do and what kind of person you are is to how you're going to fight that. So are you going to fight it, or are you not going to fight it? And everybody has to answer that question for themselves.
Chris, I've heard that same description applied for law enforcement. because in law enforcement we refer to ourselves as sheepdogs, and people fear the wolf because of its teeth, and they fear the sheepdog because it has teeth as well, even though it protects the sheep. So there's always that dichotomy of sheepdog versus sheep versus wolf, and that's a delicate line you have to balance. In the same thing as in the law enforcement capacity, it's knowing when to restrain yourself and when to let it go. When force is appropriate and when it isn't. And I've been pretty fortunate. I've never had one of my uses of force called into question. I've always, all of mine have been clean. I mean, the use of force was appropriate and to the level required.
Yes, nightly. I've seen Blood Moon. And like I said, so I guess that's my part of it, is just losing yourself to how seductive that power would be, because if you did have that power and you chose to use it for the wrong reasons, who could stop you? And so that, I guess that's why I really keyed in on that part of it, because that's the crux of my thought about it. If that did happen to me, would I be strong enough to fight it and use it the right way? I like to think I would be. You don't ever know.
So what about the taboo bits, those crossing of boundaries? The pure evil that the Skinwalker represents, plus werewolves dining on human flesh. What do you think about that?
Well, go back to King Lycaon, how I always say Lycaon. May be wrong, but that's how
Lycaon, Lycean, however it's pronounced.
Anyway,
we're both hillbillies. We ain't gonna pronounce it right.
Go back to that story, and that's the perfect part of that with the taboo stuff. He wanted to see if Zeus was really as powerful as everybody claimed he was. Has Zeus over for a meal and serves human flesh. Zeus, being Zeus, knew what he was doing, let him go all the way through, and then once he puts the food on the table, basically says, all right, you want to act like a beast, you're going to be a beast for the rest of your life. And cursed him, and he transformed into, for all intents and purposes, a werewolf. That's the big taboo. Look at movies like, what was it? Alive, I think, about the New Zealand soccer team where they crash landed.
It wasn't New Zealand. They were Chilean, I believe. Either Chilean. They were South American, Chilean or Brazilian, but they crashed in the Andes Mountains.
Andes, and had to resort to eating at first just eating the ones that had died, then kind of veered off into, and then look at Ravenous, look at the Donner Party, look at things like that. Those are really big taboo things. What people are always scared of going in the darker places of Brazil because of headhunters, cannibals. That there's a reason that there's a niche for movies and things like that in entertainment and pop cultures, because it's such a big taboo thing.
Bone Tomahawk.
I hate that movie. God, I hate that movie.
I love that movie, but that one scene gets me every time. Standing Stones has a question, and I think I'm going to throw this one to you, Robbie. Do these werewolves change into human, or do they stay wolf?
Okay, well, it depends on what you're talking about. Like the dog soldiers that DA writes about, back and forth. Most werewolves, like you see in the TV series Werewolf, line change, it's back and forth. But like DA has wrote in his books, the Ulunga Doglala, who have gone off and down the dark path, who, like we were talking about earlier, who have chose to not fight, they pretty much stay beasts the rest of their life because they've taken that dark path. Same thing with King Lycaon. He tried to serve human flesh to Zeus. Zeus made him stay. They stayed a beast for the rest of their life. They didn't turn back and forth. So I think it just depends on what you're talking about, what specifically, because the legends say all kinds of different things. Like, I think the Beast of Shevadan, I don't think it ever really had a human
No one ever
person.
talked about. Yeah, no one ever
Yeah.
talked about seeing it transform. It just
They
attacked.
said they called it a werewolf, but it was never really. And obviously, they probably had suspicions of people, but there was never really a person in that story that was somebody that they suspected was that. So if you look at that, that's Beast. But then you go to Peter Stoop, you know, that's one that supposedly was back and forth. And I think, didn't he say that it was the salve, or was his the wolf pelt?
Yeah, I think it
Which
was
one
the wolf pelt. It was
Yeah.
the one in France that was the salve. But
Yeah.
then you've also got versions of the story where the traditional, where you drink out of a wolf's print.
Yep. And they actually in Hemlock Grove, that's one of the only movies I've ever seen that used that form, where he drank out of drank the water out of a wolf's paw print, and that turned him. I mean, there's make a pact with the devil, or you get a salve from a witch, or you get a wolf pelt that's been either cursed or has spell put on it by a witch. You get bit by a werewolf, you get bit by a wolf. You think about it in the movie Wolf with Jack Nicholson, he gets bit by a wolf, and because of something in him, something that was, as that old Native American told him in the movie, there was something wild within that allowed him to shift. And his was a gradual transformation. Like the first couple times he changed, he was more like Lon Chaney, and gradually he turned into a wolf. And once he made that final transformation, that was it. He was a wolf, a four-legged regular wolf, the rest of his life. So, like I said, it just depends on what legend you're talking about. There's as many lores about it as there are movies. So I think it just really depends on what you're talking about. And there again, the lines between Hollywood and the actual myth and legend is so blurred now. It's hard to pick out what's a true folklore and what was truly made by Hollywood for the movies or books.
Absolutely. And a good rule of thumb, especially if you're going to apply anything to like cryptid investigation, or if you're going to be doing any kind of paranormal investigation, or if you want to look into any of these myths and legends, is do your own research and don't trust Hollywood.
Yeah. Now, like for DA and I,
Don, that was Peter Straub.
Yeah. For our books, and this is what I love about writing. When I wrote the first book, I was making up my lore as I went. I pulled things from the things that I liked from different books, movies, legends that I've read, and I made, like, there's not a lot of media out there where the werewolves talk, but I wanted that to be part of Rick's control, is him being able to talk. Same thing with the blue eyes. I always talk about him having ice blue eyes. And those of you who have read Grail Blood Oath, you'll know what Ramsey was talking about when he looked at Rick, when Rick was getting him and Seamus were getting kind of heated. He looked at Rick, or he was watching him, and he said something to Noah Davidson at the end. He said, "Did you see it?" And he's like, "Yep, solid blue, no feral yellow," meaning he was in control. So, but that was something that I like. I took the ice blue eyes from like the new modern Teen Wolf. The blue eyes was an alpha who had become was an omega. Is that the lone wolf?
I don't remember watching that movie.
No, I'm talking about Omega Wolf is the one that got kicked out of the pack. He was part of the pack and got kicked out.
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
So that's kind of where that part of it came. An alpha that was no longer.
And Omega is one that been driven out of the pack.
He kind of was driven out of the pack, and so by that standard, their eyes went blue. Well, I liked the blue eyes part of it. I thought, well, blue is typically, obviously law enforcement blue. It's typically a color that you assume, you look with justice, truth, the right way to do things. And then
red, always people were associated with evil.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted blue. And then people talk about feral. That's usually bestial,
no control, things like that. So that's why I did that with that. And you'll see in the next book where a lot of that comes in the next Grail book, where a lot of that comes. DA knows what I'm talking about. So I'm not trying not to spoil anything, but there's a couple of lines in there where that part is explained. But that's when we're writing these things, we can take those creative liberties, like DA was saying. But I don't think that that's something that's. What color did you see the eye color of the dog man that you saw?
It was daylight. I didn't see the color.
So I don't think that's something that's an actual thing, but that's what I wanted to do to visually represent what was going on. Something that you as a reader can read and say, oh, okay, I got that. I can understand that. So
there was a question a minute ago. Nightly 45 said, what places would you like to investigate in the future? Brother, I've got so many. I mean, there's a ton of places we want to get into.
And we've mentioned a couple of them already.
Yeah. And some of them I don't want to mention for fear of someone going in there to check it out for themselves and going in unprepared. Because some of these places that we're wanting to get into are dangerous, and not just because of possible cryptid interactions, but because they're filled with things like bears, mountain lions, snakes. Although now the cooler weather's kicking in, there's less of a concern about the snakes, but there's still bears, mountain lions, bobcats, coyotes, wolves. There's all those animals that can and will eat you. So that's why we try not to encourage people to go out and do these things themselves, especially if they're going to do it alone. But if you're going to do it safely and do it with a group. But and again, some of these places are pretty dangerous. And then there's the most dangerous of them all, the greater North American meth head, which we warn people about, because it is not difficult to run into somebody out in the woods that may have an illegal grow or a hidden lab. It's just things you have to be aware of when you get out into some of these places.
Bobby, that's actually one of the places that
that's one of them.
Talked about wanting to go to. Werewolf Springs. There's a lot of places that, if DA and I had we've talked about going to Alaska and going to it just left me. Portlock, yeah.
Port Chatham.
In Port Chatham, yeah. That's, if we could have our bucket list of places we want to go, we want to go to Oregon and go or up in Washington and try to find Ape Canyon.
Well, we know where it is, but we don't know where the old cabin site is.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's what we want to try to find, is where the old cabin is, into that area. I mean, what's some other ones that we've talked about around Mount St. Helens, and which is sort of the same area, but there's just so many places that we've talked about off air that we just, if one of us ever wins the lottery, that we're probably going to be going to most all these places.
And yes, I definitely go out in those places. I do take protection. And Missouri is one of those states where I don't have to worry about it. We're a constitutional carry state, so you can carry concealed without a permit in the state of Missouri, as long as you're 21 and have no criminal history. And I'm a retired cop, so I don't have to worry about it anyway. But it's still, Missouri's pretty open about it. They don't really bother with you. So yeah, when I'm out in the woods, I'm definitely armed. I mean, I'm sitting here at my desk, I've got 3 pistols, a shotgun, and a rifle, all within easy reach. So yeah, if you think I'm armed at my desk, you should see me in the woods.
And yes, dog, 3 of us have already been talking about the next trip.
Oh yeah, we're already making plans. So when we looking at the comparison between werewolves and skinwalkers, I think skinwalkers are more frightening to me because of the unexplained supernatural aspect and being able to do this through the use of shamanic magic. But it's just the utter lack of humanity.
Well, the fact that they're choosing this.
Yeah.
Most of the time, werewolves don't choose what happens to them. They're either attacked. Now, I mean, if you look at it like the ones that drink out of the paw or go get the salve and all that kind of stuff, but
they chose it.
Yeah, but if you look at somebody who's just, like Rick, for example, in the book, he was just attacked. But the guy who attacked him, he was just attacked. He wasn't out there trying to become a werewolf. He was just out there camping. Now,
Right.
was he a good person? No, I wrote that in there. Obviously, he wasn't a good person, but he still wasn't out there doing anything wrong. He was just out there camping, and he got attacked
Well,
and got turned.
up until the point he got attacked, he was, quote, technically a good person because he didn't do anything wrong.
Right.
However, there are two types of people when you're dealing with people that are quote unquote quote good people. There are people that are good because that's who they are and that's who they choose to be, and there are people that are only good because they're afraid to get caught or they're afraid of the consequences of being bad.
And that's more along the lines of what he was, which is why it was so easy for him to just fall into that seduction of power.
Yeah, I definitely want to get out to Werewolf Springs. I think another thing that kind of offsets the Skinwalker for me is because much like in certain crimes, this is an irredeemable act. There's no going back from it. There's no redemption arc where they get saved at the end. They chose this. And I don't say that about many crimes, but there are a few, and I think you all can pretty much figure out from my personality which ones I mean. There are certain crimes that there's just no redemption from them. I don't care, whether they find religion, forgiveness is in the hands of God, as far as I'm concerned. There are certain crimes there's just no coming back from. But with the Skinwalker, there's just no coming back. You have done something so heinous that you've basically turned your soul black. And that just, to me, that's the most terrifying thing about that, is not that they have these powers. It's what they did to get them.
Yeah. And I completely agree with that. That's why I think that's a lot scarier to me, because you knew what you had to do and you did it anyway. You chose to go down that path, that one-way path. And it just, that, to me, somebody who can, and I can't remember what I heard it on or what I saw this on, but it was like, everybody may have, like we said, everybody has the capacity to do good or evil. And there are people out there who, like, man, if I could, I would. But to actually have the compunction to actually do it, it takes a different type of individual. So somebody who actually acts on those thoughts and does the things, your Jeffrey Dahmers, your Gacy's, your Ed Gein's, people like that who actually have the compunction, I guess, if that's the right word, to actually follow through with that stuff. People like that are the ones, that's why I always said, I can watch the Friday the 13th and the Nightmare on Elm Streets and all that stuff, but things like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Saw, I've watched them, but those are not the kind of movies that I really like, because that's stuff that's real that people actually can do. I mean, something like Jason Voorhees is movie magic, movie myth, probably not going to really happen. But Texas Chainsaw Massacre, Saw, especially Saw, I mean, that's just somebody who's really smart, which there are plenty of super smart people who are completely and totally twisted and evil that could come up with stuff like that. I mean, think about waking up with your head in one of those reverse bear traps like that. And,
that's brutal.
Yeah, but that's not, that's something that actually could happen. And how do we know that something like that hadn't really happened to some of these people that have disappeared and we've never found them before? That to me is scarier than an 8-foot werewolf running around.
Well, like a great prime example of that is Moon Valley. It's not the cryptid activity that freaks Robbie out. It's the cannibals that lived up on the hill.
Oh, yeah. I'd 100 times rather deal with what we dealt with down in Moon Valley than what was up the road in Moon Valley.
Oh, well, believe me, brother, I need to talk to you offline sometime. I keep finding out more information about Moon Valley, and it just gets weirder.
Just when you think stuff like that can't get weirder.
Yeah, it did. It took a turn for the bizarre.
Yeah, okay, you're Conjuring and Sinister and stuff like that. Hostel, that's another one. You know, people going overseas and getting, you know, caught in these hotels that, yeah, stuff like that. I'm not saying it scares me as in, but that's the stuff that just makes me stop and think. That's why I always talk about situational awareness, watching where you're at, watching what's going on around you, because at any time something like that, somebody could be watching you, watching your movements, and at any time could walk up. That's what was that movie with Kiefer Sutherland and Jeff Bridges? Was it The Vanishing, where Sandra Bullock was his girlfriend? And
That sounds right.
She got kidnapped, and he was looking for her forever. And Nancy Travis was, it turned out to be his girlfriend later on, and he just kept on searching, and finally he finds out what happened to her, gets back, and the guy he traps him and takes him to his house, and he says, I just want to know what happened to her. He says, you really want to know? You got to drink this, and he knocks him out, and he ends up burying him alive. It's just, but stuff like that could really happen, and that's what makes me. You have to always be
The Serpent and the Rainbow, that movie about voodoo.
Yeah,
that movie freaked me out.
Yeah.
I think I kind of look at the whole werewolf dogman issue a little differently than Robbie does. I personally think that the werewolf legend grew from the original stories of what are now called dogmen, because in our research we've discovered that dogmen, there's references to dogman type creatures all the way back to the Greek and Roman empires, although they referred to them as the cynocephali. Which literally translates as a dog-headed, dog-headed is what it translates as. And Marco Polo and Christopher Columbus, both in their journals, talked about encountering these cynocephali in their travels. So the word dogman might be new. The sightings of these types of creatures certainly isn't. And I think personally that in Europe in the Middle Ages, that the werewolf legend grew up trying to explain these dogman type creatures who don't shift, because I think that is a lot more plausible than somebody actually physically changing into a werewolf. Then again, this is just my opinion. It's one thing we always want to point out is, folks, there's no experts in these fields. This is just my opinion based on everything I've read. Based on my own research, that's what I think. I could be way wrong. I could be, 180 degrees in the wrong direction. But that's personally what I think. And I think it's because the lore on these cynocephalite creatures dates back thousands of years. And to me, that's a far more plausible explanation than some of the magic that's tried to use to explain it down through the centuries. I'm not saying magic doesn't exist, but look at some of the things like we've talked about before, like what we're experiencing tonight, the Aurora Borealis. Back in the days of the Vikings, they tried to explain the Aurora Borealis because they didn't know what it was. They gave it a very magical description. They said it was the light of the Bifrost Bridge reflecting off the armor of the Valkyries. Now, while that is an awesome description, we know for a fact that today that's not the case. And much like, what we were talking about the other night on the Bigfoot show, what we were talking about the other night, it's just simply because we don't understand how something works. It's very common, especially among people like in the Middle Ages who weren't as educated as they are today. It's very common for us to immediately ascribe some sort of supernatural element to it. So it's the story of the werewolf could have grown up around trying to explain what these cynocephalite creatures were. Again, I could be wrong, but that's my opinion on it. And to me, it makes more sense than trying to just explain a problem away with magic. Again, I could be wrong. Robbie, what do you think about that?
Well, and I agree. I'm just, when I say that, I'm speaking of the modern dogman term, and them encompassing everything in that term. That
I 100% agree with you that I think that's probably where a lot of that or a lot of that came from, was people looking for explanations, because that's where we get a lot of our myths and things like that, is people looking for explanations. It's like you always say, any form of science, I can't even say the quote. You know which one I'm talking about.
Any form of technology sufficiently advanced appears as magic to those who don't understand it.
So
I think that's from Asimov.
Yeah, just like the Aurora Borealis, they thought it was the light reflecting off the armor of the Valkyries. Well, we know that's not what it is, but they were looking
Doesn't
for
make
an
it any less
explanation.
of a cool explanation.
Right. And it doesn't make the werewolf legend any less of a cool thing. But, if you had this stuff happening and you had people that were kind of strange in your village or whatever, that's not too much, especially back then. That's not too much of a stretch to kind of start piecing these things together and coming up with stuff like that. So I mean, I don't disagree with you with that assessment at all. I still think that there are things out there that are possibly demonic that could explain it, because like I keep using your example. I believe you encountered just an animal, but you look at some of these, demonic, red eyes, hellhound, hellspawn. I was lucky to get out alive and that kind of stuff. But then, what you had was just an animal, looked at you and said, "Oh crap, it sees me," and took off.
Right.
So I do believe there are things out there that maybe take that same type of form, but are not the same thing. But that's what they
it
look
would only
like.
make sense that something demonic would take a form they know we'd be afraid of.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I think, or where I think some of the werewolf stuff came from. Obviously, they probably saw the regular dog man, but they probably saw some of this other stuff. Okay, if you want to look at it in those terms, if you saw a regular dog man, somebody an upright humanoid with a head of a wolf, that would be pretty scary if you've never seen anything like that before, especially back in that time.
That's definitely true.
So if these entities are out there that do that and they see how afraid they are of them, maybe that's where stuff like that came from. They started appearing as the werewolves, and that's where that part came from. So I think it's something that goes hand in hand.
So, okay, well, let's I for want of a better term, I agree with you on that. But what would you define explanations of people that have talked about them being helpful, like the
Wolver.
the Wolver? Yeah, prime example.
Well, as far as I know, there's only one. That's the only one that really.
I believe there are others, but I'd have to do some digging.
That's the only one I've ever heard of. Let's put it that way. There may be more. If y'all know about them in the chat, let us know. But that's the only one that I know of it being a benevolent, helpful spirit. Now, can I explain that? No. I mean, because we can't explain half the stuff we're talking about now. All we can do is give our best guess and our honest opinion on it. And so I think that as much as there are evil spirits out there who want, there are also good spirits out there. And if you got a culture that looks at a wolf as a reverent spirit and as a protective spirit, maybe that's why it appears as that. I mean, I don't have a better explanation than that. It's just
I'm doing a little consulting of that on right now. There's actually more than one. Of course, there's the Wolver from the Shetland Islands of Scotland. You've got the Coo Sith from the Scottish Highlands. It appears as a large, shaggy green dog the size of a small cow. Often feared, but also seen as a guardian spirit. In some tales, it escorts souls to the afterlife and protects sacred places. Then there's the Amarok, which is from from Inuit mythology in Alaska. Giant appears as a giant solitary wolf. It hunts those who wander alone at night, not out of malice, but as a force of balance. It represents nature's justice and the dangers of isolation. Of course, then you've got supposedly the descendants of Fenrir. In Japan, they have the Okuri Inu. It's a large wolf or dog that follows travelers at night. It's protective if respected, but if the traveler stumbles, it may attack. But if they continue steadily, it guards them from harm. So yeah, there are lots of examples of good werewolf type creatures, but they're vastly overshadowed by all the stories of them being ravenous, bloodthirsty monsters.
But even by that, I would still argue that there's still, with those others that you mentioned, there's still a chance that
could still attack.
But with the wolver, it's completely and totally benevolent. It helps out. There's no, to my knowledge, there's no mention of it attacking people or any chance of it attacking. So
right. With the wolver, it says, a humanoid with a wolf's head and shaggy fur, peaceful and solitary, never human, always wolf-like. It's known to leave fish on the windowsills of poor families and guide lost travelers to safety.
Yeah. So I would argue, I get your point on that, but I would just argue that that's the only one that we know of that it's completely benevolent, whereas there's no mention of it attacking people. It helps, like, it leaves food for poor families. I mean, not many werewolf stories, have that kind of happy ending.
Right. Generally, if it involves any type of werewolf, it generally comes down to you being dog chow.
Yeah.
There are were leopards in West Africa. Some tales describe the were leopards as protectors of villages and spiritual intermediaries. Of course, there's berserkers, werefoxes, also known as kitsune in Japanese folklore, shape-shifting fox spirits, often female, who can be tricksters or benevolent guides. Good kitsune serve as protectors, lovers, or wise mentors, and some are messages of the Inari, the rice deity, and brings blessings. Of course, we mentioned the were-jaguars, and looks like for the most part, that's about all I can find.
Yeah. So, like you said, the good ones are far outshadowed by the bloodthirsty ones.
Well, when we talk about these bloodthirsty legends, whether it's cynocephaly, werewolf, Bigfoot, wood woes, as they used to call them in Europe, whether we're talking about any of these creatures, all of these stories that we basically have told down through the centuries that have become part of our shared cultural history, all of these help contribute to the uncanny valley effect.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are unfamiliar with uncanny valley, there's a phenomenon that was recorded by psychologists. They refer to it as the uncanny valley theory. And they tested people from all walks of life all across the planet. And what they determined was that it doesn't matter where you're from, what background, what continent, what genetic background is mixed up in your DNA, that all human life shares a common fear of something that looks almost like us in the dark. And that's called the uncanny valley theory. And I think creatures like Bigfoot and Dogman or cynocephaly or whatever you call it, I think that fear stems from the fact that sometime back in our genetic history, maybe it was around the time we learned to make fire, maybe it was before then, heck, maybe it might have even been as recently as, well, considering the missing phone 411, as recently as yesterday. I think that the reason we have that uncanny valley feeling is because at some point we were on the menu. And I think in some cases, in some places, we may still be.
Oh, yeah. Because, and that goes back to things that we've said, like Meeker, Colorado, where you got unknown canine species in today's. And the reason I bring that up is because at school yesterday, we were sitting there talking, and one of the teachers was talking about his dog, and he's like, "Yeah, we went and got that DNA swab from our vet," and he was talking about he got it back and got every percentage of every breed that was in his dog. And I was like, there's no way in today's day and time that there is such a thing as an unknown canine. If we're to believe that that we can do something like that. Having something be an unknown canine species is
kind of mind blowing,
it's just,
especially on this continent.
Yeah.
I can understand maybe in the deep recesses of Borneo encountering, some unknown canine, but for us us on North America, as broad as the United States is, for us to not have recognized a canine species, that's pretty unusual, and that's why I think especially in the case of Meeker, I think it was canine of the two-legged variety.
Yep. So I think
Miss Naoma says, "Bring your own barbecue sauce when you head to the LBL." That's right. How you doing, Miss Naoma?
Sweet baby Rays.
Were your ears ringing? We were talking about you earlier about Werewolf Springs. Hillary says, "I think the fact that they, boogers and dogmen, walk on two legs is the main reason for our fear." Exactly. That's the uncanny valley. Something that looks almost like us hunted us. And if you see something walking at you in the dark on two legs, that's that primitive brain kicking in. That could that be a person? But then by the time you realize what it is in the dark, it's probably too late.
Yeah.
Miss Naoma says this is her favorite topic. Well, I wish I'd have known that. We'd have sent you a link. We're almost done for the night. We'd have had you jump in with us. Knightley says they're all in national forests. I think, it's one of the deep dives we did. We talked about, just how much available land there is for habitat. One of the biggest arguments against Bigfoot and dogman is so many people, especially people that never leave the city, people that have lived in big cities their whole life, urban settings, they're like, we would have found them by now. They just don't realize how much unexplored wilderness is still out there. For example, the state of Alaska alone, if you could see a square mile a day, and believe me, if you're on foot, a square mile is a lot of territory to cover. I mean, to literally walk it, to see all of it. To cover a 1 square mile of territory would take you a long time. But if you could see 1 square mile a day without taking a break, it would take you 125 years to see all of Alaska. And that's literally exploring 1 square mile a day for the next 125 years. And that's just Alaska. But if you look at national parks, which we discovered is 88.5 million acres, that's a lot of acreage. But then you throw in state parks, wildlife management areas, game preserves, Bureau of Land Management, Native American reservations, all places where we're still restricted from either hunting or exploring. When you add all of that up, that comes up to over 1 billion acres. 1 billion acres of pristine habitat that we still don't have full access to. When people think about how big the United States is, it just really doesn't sink in that most European countries are no bigger than one of our states. And heck, you could put half of Europe in Texas.
The U.S. from coast to coast is 3 times the size of the UK. It's 2,700 miles from coast to coast, which is like a 40-hour car drive. Mm-hmm. You can get across the UK in a couple hours.
Thank you, Miss Lene. Miss Lene is giving us our 15-minute warning.
I think it sometimes I learned this on our show that we did about the New Jersey Pine Barrens. People think New Jersey, they think of the city, the turnpikes, close to New York, stuff like that. The Jersey Pine Barrens are over 1 million acres in New Jersey. That blew my mind. And that's just New Jersey. That's not one of our biggest states.
Right here in the Ozarks, the Mark Twain National Forest and the Ozark National Forest. Between the two of them, they're almost 5 million square acres.
Yeah.
That's a lot of land.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. People sometimes just don't realize how big this country really is and how massive the amount of land that we have that is, because, we've got so many big cities with so many people living in these big cities. People just don't realize how much land is still out there that's undeveloped and untouched by anybody. That places
there are places in the Mark Twain here in Missouri that probably hasn't seen a person in 100 years.
Yeah.
It's just so vast.
And just like we talked about the other day, well, what did we say? There's 17 million deer in the country. Well, that's
I think it was between 12 and 20 million estimate.
And
that's a lot of deer.
How many deer hunters go an entire season and don't see a single deer? And we know that population is massive.
It's like deer develop radar the minute hunting season begins because they like 100 and they're gone. So it's deer season. It's tough to see one sometimes. They get really smart.
But we know they're there, and there's that many here in this country. But yet hunters,
there's probably nowhere near that many of cryptid populations.
Right. So when you start thinking about it in terms like that, it becomes obvious that it's just like your analogy with taking the teaspoon down to the ocean where a wave comes in and dipping it up, saying, "Nope, no sharks." I guess that means they don't exist. When you go into this one little small area as a deer hunter and you say, "Well, they don't exist because I've been in the woods all my life."
Someone asked about the Jersey Devil earlier. Yeah, I believe there's something to it. I don't know what. I've never been there, but I think there's something to that legend.
Yeah, that's a very fascinating. So that's a whole show in itself about the Jersey Devil.
Yeah. Cajun Dog said that 640 square acres is 1 square mile. That is a lot of acreage to cover. I used to deer hunt on 100 acres, and that seemed like it was so big I couldn't walk across it. But, obviously you could. But 640 square acres, that's a heck of a lot of land.
Yep.
Don, we're seeing a lot of deer here in town. Yeah, we've been finding deer, on Ring doorbell. Heck, that here in Springfield, they've had mountain lions and black bears on Ring doorbell cameras. There was just a thing in the paper, the Springfield News Leader. There was just a thing in the paper about a bear here in the middle of town got chased off by some lady's dogs, and they had pictures of it in the freaking newspaper. So, wild animals do come into cities, and the same thing goes for cryptids. There's lots of stories about cryptid sightings in town. Robbie, we're coming up on the 10-minute mark, and we need to wrap things up by 5 minutes till, because we got the outro, and then Race has to spool us out because we got another show waiting to come on as soon as we go off. So, folks, we're going to start kind of winding things down so Race can exit us on time. But some of the things we always want to talk about at the end is check out our affiliates. We've got some amazing affiliates. Dark Angel Medical is one of our affiliates. It's owned by Doc. They're a veteran-owned company, packing birthdays in boxes. They produce high-end med kits, anything up from just a basic first aid kit all the way up to trauma kits. I keep 2 or 3 on me pretty much daily. There's some in my car. There's one on my pack. There's one on my plate carrier. But there's you at some point in your life, you're going to need a first aid kit. And whether or not you have one on hand is up to you. But check out darkangelmedical.com. Don't forget to use discount code CRYPTID20 for 20% off your order. And also check out the good folks over at Sigwell Arms. That just popped up. SigwellArms.com is the website. They're the only place that has the registered rights to do. Yeah, the licensing. There we go. That was the word I was looking for. The licensing to do Codename Wild Hunt and even other of my novels. To do the Codename Wild Hunt uppers on ARs and things like that. So check them out at SigwellArms.com. Don't forget to use code Bigfoot5 at the end if you get 5% off your order. They even make their own freedom seeds, and they have really good deals. Hey, we got a new member. Awesome. Thank you, Chicken Bird. Appreciate that. Awesome. But check out Sigwell Arms because they've got really reasonable prices on a lot of stuff, and they make and manufacture the firearms there. They also make their own ammo. You can get some really good prices on that. And if you want a whisper pickle for that pew pew of yours, they have those as well. So check them out again at sigwelarms.com. And finally, check out the good folks over at Scallywag Tactical. They make some of the best knives I've ever carried, and I take one with me pretty much everywhere I go, at least one. And they've got a full line of pretty much everything from camp knives to tactical knives, just a whole line, just fantastic blades. I carry at least one of their fixed blades and a pocket knife pretty much everywhere I go. So check them out and use discount. Again, all of our affiliates are either veteran owned, law enforcement owned. Check them out. Let them know we sent you. But check out Scallywag Tactical, and don't forget to use discount code DA Roberts 10 for 10% off your entire order. And having done that, as we continue to wind things down, there's something that I always mention at the end of a show that is very near and dear to my heart, and that is the 22 a Day Foundation. We lose 22 veterans a day to suicide, and that is 22 too many. So reach out to your friends and family who are first responders or veterans, especially right here with Veterans Day. Reach out to your friends and family who wore a uniform, who put it on the line to keep us free and to keep us safe. Let them know you think about them. Let them know you care, because PTSD is not something that anybody should have to face alone. We shouldn't, we say all the time, don't let the hard days win, but at least 22 times a day, the hard days are winning. So again, please mission22.org. If you're a veteran or a first responder and you need to reach out, do so. I've had to do that myself. Sometimes the things that you experience and the things that you have to go through in uniform leave an indelible mark on you. And, you don't have to fight that alone. It doesn't make you weak to reach out for help. That's something that's a sandwich I had to swallow myself. So it does not make you weak to reach out for help. Yeah, you wouldn't go into combat alone, so why fight this alone? Mission22.org. Another good one that you can check out is odmp.com. That's Officer Down Memorial Page, odmp.com. That'll show you the toll it's taken on our first responders. It's incredible, folks. Over 600, almost 685, almost 700 officers have been injured in the line. Have been wounded in the line of duty this year alone, and it's not over. And I couldn't even tell you how many line of duty deaths there have been so far. But check out Mission 22, check out odmp.com, and support the folks over at the Till Valhalla projects, because they are doing wonderful things for veterans. I'm proud to support those guys because they're for veterans by veterans. So definitely check those guys out. Exactly, Jeff. If you don't have anybody else to reach out to one of us. I know half the folks in the chat, especially the ones that have served in some capacity, would be willing to sit and chat with you, even if it's over a video link or over a phone call, because I'd rather hear your story than read your obituary. So reach out, let somebody know, and you don't have to fight these demons alone. Folks, there's something else I was about to say. And, check out Robbie's new book. Kodiak is burning up the charts. It's going to be a real chart topper, folks. This is an awesome book. But I will warn you, when you read this book, keep some tissue on hand, because you're going to need it. It's a very poignant story about adversity, about overcoming difficulty, about perseverance. It's just a fantastic story. And you've seen the link popping up from time to time in the chat tonight. And don't forget to go over and leave him a review and get a copy of his book. And I also just released a new book. It is one of the next in the code name. It is the next in the Dark Frontiers series. Dark Frontiers, Devil of the Absarokas, and it's currently #1 in Western horror. So hopefully you guys will check that out. And it's approaching #1. It's #8 in occult suspense. So fingers crossed. I'd love to hit number 1 in 2 categories. That would be just amazing. What state am I based in? I'm in Missouri, and Robbie is in South Carolina. And if you like our books, check out Luca T. Jacobs. She's awesome. She's the one that did both Robbie and my cover, and she's an author as well. She writes in the same genre that Robbie and I do, a lot of cryptid horror, a lot of classic horror, so check her out as well. And folks, we're so proud to be part of the OnX network now, and the UnX network. And for you guys did not know what UnX means, it's unexplained. UnX Network is awesome. My buddy Race, I've known him for years. I just happened to run into him at a convention last month, and we reconnected, and it was karma. I mean, it was just meant to be. I mean, I got to talking to him, and we had a cryptid show, and they had just lost a cryptid show on their network, and it was just one of those synchronicity moments where everything just lined up. And I'm really proud to be part of the OnX network, and I'm really happy that we're here, and I'm looking forward to the growth of the channel and to be able to continue to bring y'all awesome new content and awesome new books as well. Okay, so we are now at the time where we've got to wrap this thing up. We're going to close her out with a toast real fast, and Robbie and I are going to give the toast, and then Race is going to roll the credits. But I will just do it real quick. It's an old Irish drinking toast. You guys will raise a glass with it. Doesn't matter what you're raising. But the toast says, "But since it fell into my lot that I should rise and you should not, I'll gently rise and softly call. Good night and joy be to you all. Slán Java, and see you guys on Saturday night."
Slán.
Plains, the winds are howling, saloon doors swinging, shadows growling. 3 lawmen stand tough as rawhide. Yeah, Doc and DA, nothing can abide. Whiskey shots and poker faces, staring down the darkest spaces in this town where legends roam. These boys bring justice, sending evil home. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night. Jed's a howler, claws of steel, Doc's a biter, makes the devil real. But DA's a shifty one, a shape-shifting soul, can turn to anything, takes any form, takes control. Tonight the chupacabras come to town, sucking the life from all around. But these lawmen, they ain't afraid, they'll face the darkness unafraid. Cryptid lawmen, wild and free, hunting monsters for all to see. With silver bullets and grit of steel, they fight the darkness, make the demons squeal. From dusty canyons to moonlit plains, justice rides with wind and rains. Cryptid lawmen, a fearsome sight, standing tall against the endless night. Full moon rises, bat wings flap, the air grows cold, a chill and trap. But these lawmen, they're ready to fight underneath the pale moonlight. Jed and Doc transform with a howl, DA shifts, becomes a night